I'm Samantha Reynolds, 35, and yesterday I discovered my only brother Ryan's wedding through Instagram. There, we were a lifetime of memories together, and I wasn't even invited to watch him say I do. When I texted him, shell-shocked and hurt, his response shattered me. My wife doesn't want you there. It's better this way. Better for who? As my hands shook with rage and grief, I knew this betrayal wouldn't stand. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved. Let me know if you've experienced family drama like this. Trust me, this story is going to take some wild turns you won't believe. Ryan and I grew up in a small town just outside Boston where everyone knew everyone else's business. Our childhood home had a massive oak tree in the backyard, where we built a rickety treehouse that our father declared would collapse any day. It never did, even when our family structure did. I was 12 and Ryan was 9 when our parents' marriage imploded. Mom caught Dad with his secretary. Such a cliché, but no less devastating. The divorce was ugly, with Dad moving across the country to start a new family while barely maintaining contact. Mom fell apart working 2 jobs and struggling with depression. That's when I became more than just Ryan's sister. I became his protector, his confidant, sometimes even his parent. I made his lunches, helped with homework, and made sure he got to soccer practice. I'd check if he brushed his teeth and tucked him in with stories about brave knights and dragons when Mom worked night shifts. We were a team against the world. When I was 17 and preparing for college, Mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. My acceptance letter to NYU gathered dust as I deferred my enrollment to stay home. Ryan was only 14, still needed someone stable. I took a job at the local bank, scheduling my shifts around Mom's treatments and Ryan's school activities. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved. Let me know if you've experienced family drama like this. Trust me, this story is going to take some wild turns you won't believe. But I saw the fear in Ryan's eyes. He'd already lost one parent to abandonment. He couldn't handle losing another to illness. So I stayed. Mom recovered after 2 brutal years of treatment, but by then I was established at the bank and rising through the ranks. College seemed like a distant dream. Instead, I took night classes at the community college, eventually earning my business degree while still supporting our small family. Ryan, however, flourished. He earned a scholarship to Boston University, studying finance, with the drive of someone determined to never be financially vulnerable. I couldn't have been prouder, especially when he landed a prestigious internship at Morgan Stanley his junior year, an opportunity that came through a client I'd built a relationship with at the bank. "I wouldn't be here without you, Sam," Ryan told me at his graduation dinner. "You're the reason I made it." Those words meant everything to me. I thought they meant something to him, too. Then Ryan met Meredith Taylor at a charity gala 3 years ago. She came from old money, the kind that has buildings named after their family at private universities. From our first meeting, her smile never reached her eyes when she looked at me. She'd examine my department store clothes with a subtle sweep of her gaze that made me feel like something stuck to her shoe. "Ryan speaks so fondly of you," she said the first time we met, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "It's so touching how you've managed, despite your circumstances." I tried to connect with her for Ryan's sake. Invited her to lunch, suggested shopping trips, even offered to help when they bought their first home together, a luxury condo downtown that I suspected her parents largely financed, though Ryan never admitted it. Each attempt was met with a polite but firm rebuff. "I'm swamped with foundation work, or I've already made plans with my friends from Wellesley." Always delivered with that same plastic smile. Ryan began changing. First, it was small things. Missing our weekly Sunday brunches, forgetting to call on Mom's birthday. Then bigger absences, skipping Mom's retirement party because Meredith had tickets to the symphony that couldn't possibly be exchanged. "She's just helping me network," Ryan explained when I confronted him. "These connections are important for my career." I understood ambition. I'd sacrificed my own dreams to give Ryan his chances. But what I couldn't understand was the growing coldness, how he'd check his phone when I spoke, how conversations that once flowed now felt strained and awkward. The final warning sign came at Christmas dinner last year. Ryan and Meredith arrived 2 hours late to Mom's house, bringing an expensive bottle of wine that Meredith made sure to mention couldn't be found in stores like these around here. When Mom proudly served her traditional ham, Meredith pushed it around her plate before whispering loudly to Ryan, "Didn't you tell them I don't eat factory-farmed meat?" The look of shame that crossed my brother's face as he glanced at Mom broke my heart. It was as if he was suddenly embarrassed by us, by the family that had moved mountains to keep him safe and loved. As they left that night, I heard Meredith say, "That wasn't so bad, was it? Only once a year, darling." I should have known then that something fundamental had shifted, that the brother who once declared I was his hero now saw me as something to overcome in his new life. But nothing prepared me for the complete betrayal that was coming. 6 months ago, Ryan invited Mom and me to dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place with no prices on the menu and sommeliers who hovered nearby. Ryan seemed nervous, fidgeting with his water glass, until finally he reached for Meredith's hand and announced they were engaged. "We're getting married," he beamed, while Meredith extended her left hand to display a diamond that could have paid off my car loan. "Oh, honey, Mom," cried immediately, getting up to hug them both. I followed suit, pushing down the unease I felt at Meredith's stiff response to our embraces. "When are you thinking?" I asked, already mentally calculating vacation days and budget adjustments. A wedding at their level wouldn't be cheap, and I wanted to help however I could. "We're thinking spring," Ryan said. "April 15th, Meredith specified. "At my parents' estate in Greenwich." "That's only 6 months away," I said, surprised. "That doesn't give us much time to plan." Meredith's smile tightened. "Well, Daddy's hired the best wedding planner in New England, so we're in good hands." "I'd still love to help," I offered. "I know all of Ryan's favorite things. Maybe I could help with the groom's cake or the music playlist." Something flashed in Meredith's eyes before she composed herself. "That's sweet, Samantha, but we're going for a very specific aesthetic. The planner has it all under control." "That's only 6 months away," I said, surprised. "That doesn't give us much time to plan." I nearly choked on my wine. "Really?" Meredith's smile looked physically painful now. "Of course. Ryan's told me how close you two are. It would mean so much to him." I nearly choked on my wine. "Really?" "I'd be honored," I said sincerely. Over the next few weeks, I waited for details about bridal party activities. When nothing came, I reached out to Meredith directly. "Just checking in about bridesmaid duties," I texted. "Happy to help with anything you need." "Thanks," came the reply hours later. "Still getting organized, we'll be in touch soon." But soon never came. When I asked Ryan about it during a rare moment when I caught him alone, he seemed uncomfortable. "Meredith's just really stressed. Her mom is being super controlling about everything. Give her some time." I did. Weeks passed. Then one day, scrolling through Instagram, I saw photos of a lavish bridal shower posted by one of Meredith's friends. There was Meredith surrounded by women in pastel dresses, opening gifts and laughing beneath a future Mrs. Reynolds banner. I hadn't been invited. When I called Ryan, he sounded harried. It was just a small thing her sorority sisters threw together last minute. "I'm sure she meant to invite you." But the professional decorations, custom cocktails, and monogrammed party favors visible in the photos told a different story. This had been planned for weeks. Then came the bachelorette weekend, a lavish trip to the Bahamas that I discovered through more social media posts. Again, no invitation. By now, I was hurt beyond words. When I finally confronted Ryan during a rare lunch meeting, I'd practically begged him for he couldn't meet my eyes. "Look, Meredith feels uncomfortable around you," he said quietly. "She thinks you're judgmental about her lifestyle." What I was genuinely shocked. When have I ever been judgmental? "You make comments about her family's money, about her clothes and the places we go." "I've never said anything negative about those things," I protested. "I've only ever tried to connect with her." Ryan sighed. "It's also the way you talk about our childhood, Sam, about how you took care of me. It makes her feel like you think no one can look after me the way you did." The accusation stung because there might have been a grain of truth there. I had been protective of Ryan, but only because I loved him. "We're keeping the wedding small," Ryan finally said. "Family and close friends only." I am family, I reminded him, my voice breaking slightly. You know what I mean. Meredith's family is paying for everything. They have a certain vision. I left that lunch with a pit in my stomach, but still holding on to hope that this was all just pre-wedding stress and miscommunication. Surely when the actual invitations went out, I'd receive one. Even if I wasn't a bridesmaid, I was the groom's sister. Of course I'd be invited. The weeks passed. Nothing came in the mail. Ryan's calls and texts became increasingly rare. Then came the day I'll never forget. Scrolling through Instagram on my lunch break, I saw it number Meredith and Ryan say I do trending among our mutual connections. My fingers trembling, I clicked on the hashtag and was assaulted by images of an elaborate wedding. There was my brother in a designer tuxedo beaming next to his bride in what looked like a cathedral of flowers. There were our distant cousins from Minnesota, neighbors from our childhood street, Ryan's college roommate, and even former colleagues from his first job. Over 200 people gathered to celebrate, according to the posts. 200 people. And I wasn't one of them. In a daze, I texted Ryan, "You got married and didn't invite me. Your own sister." 20 minutes later, his response appeared, "My wife doesn't want you there. It's better this way." No apology. No explanation. Just 11 words that erased a lifetime of love and sacrifice. I called in sick for the rest of the day, drove home in tears, and collapsed on my couch surrounded by framed photos of Ryan and me through the years. Photos of a brother who apparently no longer existed. The pain was physical, like someone had torn out a vital organ. How could he do this to me, after everything we'd been through together? That evening, my phone buzzed with messages from relatives who'd attended the wedding. "Missed you at the wedding," wrote Aunt Patricia. "Ryan said you were dealing with some personal problems and couldn't make it." Another text from our cousin David. "Hey, hope you're doing okay. Ryan mentioned you were having gambling issues. Let me know if you need help." Gambling issues? I'd never gambled a day in my life beyond the occasional lottery ticket. That's when I realized Meredith hadn't just excluded me from the wedding. She'd been systematically turning Ryan against me, with lies and manipulations, painting me as someone who needed to be cut out of his life. And Ryan, the brother I'd given up everything for, had chosen to believe her. 3 days after discovering the wedding, I was still numb with shock when my coworker Alicia knocked on my office door. I'd managed to return to work, though I was barely functional, moving through tasks like a robot, with tears constantly threatening to spill over. "Sam," Alicia said, tentatively. "Can we talk?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Alicia closed the door behind her and sat across from me. "I've been debating whether to tell you this, but seeing you so upset, I think you need to know." "Know what?" I asked, my heart sinking further if that was even possible. "I was at your brother's wedding." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "You were what?" Alicia shifted uncomfortably. "My husband Jason went to business school with Meredith's brother. We got an invitation a few months ago. I had no idea you weren't invited until I got there and couldn't find you." The betrayal expanded to include yet another person who'd known about this event while I remained in the dark. I overheard some conversations. Alicia continued, her voice dropping. "About you. From Meredith and her family." The acid in my stomach churned. What did they say? Meredith told people you have serious emotional problems, that you're obsessively attached to Ryan and have threatened her multiple times. That's completely insane. I exploded, then immediately lowered my voice, aware of the thin office walls. "I've never threatened anyone in my life." "I know," Alicia assured me, which is why I was so confused. "But there's more." She told Ryan's friends from college that you tried to sabotage their relationship from the beginning because you're jealous of any woman in Ryan's life. Each word felt like a slap. I struggled to breathe properly as Alicia continued. Her parents were telling people you've been financially draining Ryan for years, that you're the reason they couldn't afford a house in Beacon Hill. The absurdity would have been laughable if it wasn't so painful. I'd never taken a penny from Ryan. If anything, I'd slipped him extra money during his college years, when his scholarship didn't cover everything. Why would they say these things? I whispered more to myself than to Alicia. I don't know. But Ryan seemed to be going along with it all. He looked uncomfortable when your name came up, but he didn't contradict anything they said. I thanked Alicia for her honesty, then closed my office door and broke down completely. It wasn't just that I'd been excluded from the most important day of my brother's life. It was that I'd been transformed into a villain, in a narrative I didn't even recognize. The next day, I called our Aunt Patricia, determined to understand the extent of Meredith's campaign against me. Aunt Patricia had always been close to both of us, stepping in to help Mom when things were particularly tough after the divorce. "Samantha," she answered warmly. "How are you doing, honey? Better, I hope." "Better than what?" I asked cautiously. "Well, with everything you've been going through." Ryan told us about the gambling problems. I took a deep breath. "Aunt Patricia, I need to be very clear about something. I don't have gambling problems. I've never gambled in my life." A long pause followed. "But Ryan said, he told everyone that's why you weren't at the wedding. That you'd gotten in trouble with some loan sharks and were laying low." "None of that is true," I said firmly. "The truth is, I wasn't invited to the wedding. Ryan and Meredith deliberately excluded me." Another pause. "That can't be right. Why would they not invite you?" "I'm trying to figure that out myself." The conversation grew increasingly uncomfortable as I pieced together the elaborate fiction Ryan and Meredith had created. According to them, I was an unstable, financially irresponsible woman who'd become dangerously obsessed with my brother's relationship. "He even showed us texts," Aunt Patricia admitted reluctantly. "Messages you supposedly sent Meredith threatening her." My blood ran cold. "Those were fabricated. I've never threatened anyone." The doubt in her voice was clear. "I don't know what to believe, Samantha. Ryan seemed so worried about you." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. This wasn't just about a wedding snub. This was character assassination, a systematic effort to isolate Ryan from me by destroying my reputation. I spent the next week calling other family members and friends, trying to understand how deep this deception went. The pattern was always the same. Ryan and Meredith had painted me as unstable, financially desperate, and irrationally jealous of their relationship. The most shocking revelation came when I discovered Ryan had removed me as his emergency contact at work, replacing me with Meredith just 2 months after they'd started dating. He'd also revised his will, cutting me out entirely. I was being erased from my brother's life piece by piece. Desperate for answers, I began researching Meredith online, digging deeper than the polished LinkedIn and Instagram profiles I'd seen before. It took days of searching, but eventually I found an alumni newsletter from her private high school that mentioned her transfer there in junior year after an incident at her previous school. Further digging revealed rumors of Meredith being asked to leave that first school after a campaign of bullying against a former friend who'd started dating a boy Meredith liked. Then I found a pattern in her past relationships. Each of her ex-boyfriends had gradually distanced themselves from friends and family while dating her. Her most recent ex before Ryan had cut ties with his family entirely, only to reconnect with them after their breakup, claiming Meredith had convinced him they were trying to control his life. This wasn't just about me. This was about Meredith's pathological need to isolate her partners from anyone who might hold emotional significance for them. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by evidence of Meredith's manipulations, and for the first time, I considered giving up. Maybe it would be easier to walk away, to accept that I'd lost my brother to this toxic relationship, and try to rebuild my life without him. The photo on my nightstand caught my eye. Ryan at age 10, missing his front teeth, his arm thrown around my shoulders as we posed in front of the repaired treehouse after a storm had damaged it. I'd spent an entire weekend fixing it because I couldn't bear to see his disappointment. "I'll always fix things for you," I'd promised him then. Could I keep that promise now when the thing that needed fixing was his perception of me? Or was it already too late? A week after learning the extent of Meredith's lies, I hit rock bottom. I called in sick to work and spent the day in bed, alternating between angry tears and numb disbelief. The weight of betrayal was suffocating, making even the simplest tasks feel impossible. The question that kept circling in my mind was why? Why would Ryan believe these lies? Why would he allow Meredith to destroy our relationship? Had our entire history together meant nothing? By evening, I'd run out of tears. I dragged myself to the shower, then forced myself to go to the corner market for food, having depleted everything in my apartment during my self-imposed isolation. As I listlessly pushed my cart through the aisles, a voice called out, "Samantha, Samantha Reynolds." I turned to see James Moretti, Ryan's college roommate and former best friend. We'd met many times during Ryan's university years, and I'd always liked his straightforward manner. "James," I said, trying to summon a smile and failing miserably. "It's been a while." I turned to see James Moretti, Ryan's college roommate and former best friend. We'd met many times during Ryan's university years, and I'd always liked his straightforward manner. "Like I've been hit by a truck," I supplied. "Yeah, it's been a rough couple of weeks." James hesitated. "I was at Ryan's wedding. I noticed you weren't there." A fresh wave of pain washed over me, and to my horror, tears started forming again. "I wasn't invited." James's eyes widened. "What? But that's... Ryan said you couldn't make it because of some personal issues." "That's the story they're telling everyone," I said bitterly. "The truth is, his wife doesn't want me in their lives." James guided me to a nearby coffee shop, and over the next hour I poured out everything. The exclusion from wedding activities, the discovered lies, the campaign to paint me as unstable and desperate. "I wish I could say I'm surprised," James said when I finished. "But honestly, I've been concerned about Ryan for a while now." "What do you mean?" James looked uncomfortable. "Ryan and I used to talk every week, even after college. Then he met Meredith, and suddenly he was always too busy. When we did talk, it felt like he was reading from a script." "That's exactly how it's been with me," I said, feeling validated for the first time in weeks. "There's something else," James continued, lowering his voice. "I work in financial advising too, though, at a different firm than Ryan. About 6 months ago, a client mentioned some unusual investment advice Ryan had given him, advice that pushed some pretty questionable high-commission products." I frowned. "That doesn't sound like Ryan. He's always been careful with his clients' money." That's what I thought. But when I asked him about it, he got defensive and said I didn't understand the level of clientele he was dealing with now. His exact words. James took a deep breath. "Then last month I heard rumors about some irregularities in the accounts Ryan manages. Nothing concrete, but enough whispers to make me worry." "What kind of irregularities?" "Unusual transfers, aggressive investments that don't match client profiles. The kind of things that raise red flags in our industry." My mind raced. Ryan had always been ethical to a fault. During college, he'd returned a wallet he'd found with $300 inside, tracking down the owner through ID cards. The Ryan I knew would never risk his clients' finances with questionable practices. "Do you think Meredith could be influencing his professional decisions?" I asked. James shrugged. "All I know is that everything changed when she came into the picture. And from what you're telling me, I'm not the only one who's lost the Ryan we knew." That conversation with James became the turning point. As painful as the betrayal had been, I couldn't just walk away. Not if Ryan was potentially heading for professional and personal disaster. I might have lost my brother, but I wasn't going to stand by and watch him destroy himself. Over the next few days, I began methodically gathering information. James introduced me to a colleague who had left Ryan's firm recently, citing concerns about compliance issues. She wouldn't give specifics due to confidentiality, but her meaningful glances told me all I needed to know. I scoured social media for clues about Meredith's lifestyle, finding a pattern of lavish spending, designer clothes, exotic vacations, a brand new Mercedes, all appearing shortly after she'd begun dating Ryan. Meanwhile, Ryan had told our mother he was too strapped for cash to help with her plumbing emergency last month, something that had never happened before. Mom had dipped into her modest retirement savings instead, never mentioning it to Ryan again. The pieces formed a disturbing picture. Meredith was not only isolating Ryan emotionally, but possibly pushing him toward financial impropriety to fund her expensive tastes. This wasn't just about my hurt feelings anymore. This was about protecting my brother from someone who might be systematically destroying his life ethics and relationships. I created a document detailing everything I'd discovered. The lies told about me, the pattern of isolation, the financial inconsistencies. I included screenshots of social media posts showing Meredith's spending sprees, juxtaposed with texts from Ryan claiming financial hardship to family. But I knew I couldn't just confront Ryan with this information. Meredith had already poisoned him against me. He'd dismiss anything coming directly from me as jealousy or instability, just as she'd conditioned him to do. Meanwhile, Ryan had told our mother he was too strapped for cash to help with her plumbing emergency last month, something that had never happened before. Mom had dipped into her modest retirement savings instead, never mentioning it to Ryan again. I reached out to James, to Ryan's former mentor at the bank, where he'd interned, to his old soccer coach who'd remained a friend into adulthood. Each had noticed the same pattern. Ryan withdrawing, becoming someone they barely recognized. "I'm not doing this for revenge," I told them during a meeting at my apartment. "I'm genuinely scared for my brother. This isn't the Ryan we know. Something is very wrong and I think he needs help." Together, we formed a plan, not to attack Meredith directly, which would only make Ryan defend her more fiercely, but to create opportunities for Ryan to see the inconsistencies himself, to plant seeds of doubt that might eventually grow into recognition of his situation. It wouldn't be quick or easy. Meredith had spent years building her influence over Ryan, creating a reality where I was the enemy and she was his savior. Breaking through that would take patience and strategy. But for the first time since discovering the wedding photos, I felt a sense of purpose replacing my despair. The sister in me, the one who had always protected Ryan, who had postponed her own dreams to ensure his safety and happiness, was awake again. I might have lost my invitation to his wedding, but I hadn't lost my determination to fight for my brother. After 2 weeks of careful planning with James and Ryan's other concerned friends, I decided it was time for a direct approach. Not confrontational, I knew that would backfire, but an open, honest conversation where I could at least try to understand what had happened between us. I texted Ryan, "Can we meet for lunch? Just to talk. I miss you." To my surprise, he responded almost immediately. "Okay. Café Laurent, Tuesday at noon." My heart leapt with hope. This was progress. I spent hours preparing for that lunch, rehearsing what I'd say, focusing on I statements rather than accusations, ready to listen more than speak. I even bought a new outfit, wanting to look put together and stable, counteracting whatever image Meredith had created of me. When Tuesday arrived, I got to the cafe 20 minutes early, securing a quiet corner table. I ordered sparkling water and tried to calm my nerves as I waited. Noon came and went. At 12:15, I texted Ryan, "I'm here at our table in the back. Take your time." At 12:30, the cafe door finally opened. But it wasn't Ryan who walked in. It was Meredith. She spotted me immediately, her perfectly made-up face breaking into that familiar artificial smile as she approached my table. "Samantha," she said smoothly, sliding into the chair across from me. "I hope you don't mind. Ryan got tied up with a client emergency, so I thought I'd come in his place." My stomach dropped. I was hoping to speak with my brother. "I know, and he feels terrible about missing it. But we thought this might actually be a good opportunity for us to clear the air." She signaled a waiter. "Sparkling water, please, with lime." I fought to keep my expression neutral. Where is Ryan really? Meredith's smile never faltered. "Exactly where I said, working. That's what responsible people do when clients need them." The implication that I wasn't responsible hung in the air between us. "How convenient that he had an emergency just when we were supposed to meet," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Actually, it is inconvenient," Meredith countered smoothly. "But that's life when you're handling millions in assets. Not everyone understands the pressure he's under." Again, the subtle dig. "I understand my brother better than anyone," I said quietly. "We've been through more together than you could possibly know." Something flashed in Meredith's eyes. Irritation, perhaps even hatred, before her mask of pleasantness returned. "That's exactly why I wanted to talk to you, Samantha. This attachment you have to Ryan, it's becoming unhealthy." I nearly choked on my water. "Excuse me." "The constant calls and texts. The way you talk about taking care of him when he was a child, as if he still needs that. The clear resentment toward me." She leaned forward. "Ryan is a grown man with a wife now. He doesn't need his sister monitoring his every move." "I haven't been allowed to monitor anything," I replied. "I wasn't even invited to your wedding." "Because we knew you would make a scene," Meredith said flatly. "Just like you're about to do now." "I'm not making a scene," I said, though I could feel my voice rising. I'm trying to understand why my brother has cut me out of his life based on lies you've told him. Meredith's eyes narrowed. Lies. Is it a lie that you've always tried to control Ryan? That you guilt him about the sacrifices you made? That you've criticized our relationship from day one? Yes, that is a lie. My voice was definitely too loud now. Other diners were beginning to look our way. I've only ever wanted Ryan to be happy. You've only ever wanted Ryan to need you, Meredith corrected coldly. And he doesn't anymore. That's what really bothers you. My hands were shaking with anger and hurt. You've systematically isolated him from everyone who cares about him, made up stories about me having gambling problems, told people I threatened you when I've never done any such thing. Meredith's expression didn't change, but I noticed she'd placed her phone on the table, screen up. With a sickening realization, I saw it was recording. Are you recording this? I demanded. I need to protect myself, she said calmly. Your obsession with my husband has reached concerning levels. That's when I noticed two women at a nearby table were also holding up phones, clearly filming our interaction. Friends of Meredith's strategically placed to capture whatever happened next. I'd walked straight into a trap. You planned this? I said, my voice hollow with disbelief. You knew exactly what you were doing. I'm simply having lunch with my sister-in-law, Meredith replied, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. There's no need to escalate, Samantha. This kind of emotional instability is exactly why Ryan is concerned about you. It was a masterful performance. She was deliberately provoking me while appearing perfectly reasonable herself. Any angry response from me would only reinforce the narrative she'd created. I stood up, gathering my dignity as best I could. This conversation is over. Please tell my brother that when he's ready to speak to me himself without manipulation or audience, I'll be waiting. Meredith's voice followed me as I walked away. See, this is exactly the kind of dramatic behavior Ryan warned me about. Always making everything about yourself, Samantha. I managed to make it to my car before breaking down in tears of frustration and humiliation. I'd been outmaneuvered completely. That evening, my phone rang with Ryan's number. For a moment, hope flared. Maybe he'd heard what happened and was calling to apologize to finally listen to my side. How dare you attack my wife, he said, without preamble, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. After everything she's tried to do to include you in our lives. Include me, I was incredulous. Ryan, I wasn't even invited to your wedding. Because we knew you'd make it all about you, just like you did today. Creating a public scene, accusing Meredith of ridiculous conspiracies. She set me up, I tried to explain. She brought people to film me, to make me look unstable. I've seen the video Sam Ryan cut in. Meredith is sitting there calmly while you're practically shouting about being persecuted. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? Having my sister harass my wife in public? Include me, I was incredulous. Ryan, I wasn't even invited to your wedding. My heart sank as I realized just how thoroughly Meredith had manipulated the situation. Of course, the video would only show her calm responses and my increasing agitation, not the provocations that caused it. The sister I thought I knew wouldn't be so jealous and resentful of my happiness that she'd try to destroy it, he replied. I'm not trying to destroy anything, I'm trying to save you. From what exactly? A successful marriage, financial security, a life beyond the guilt trips and emotional manipulation I've dealt with since childhood. Each word was a knife to my heart. These weren't Ryan's thoughts. They were Meredith's poison repeated in his voice. If you contact Meredith again, he continued, if you show up at our home or my office, I'll file for a restraining order. I'm not joking, Sam. Stay away from us. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat in stunned silence, the phone slipping from my fingers. My brother had just threatened legal action against me. The same brother I'd held through nightmares, whose soccer games I'd never missed, who once called me his hero. The video of our confrontation went viral within Ryan's social circle the next day. My work colleagues saw it. My neighbors. Even Mom called confused and concerned about what was happening between her children. The edited clip showed exactly what Meredith intended, me looking increasingly unhinged, while she maintained perfect composure. The narrative was set. Ryan's unstable sister couldn't handle his marriage and was harassing his innocent wife. I seriously considered giving up then. The humiliation was complete, the damage to my relationship with Ryan seemingly irreparable. Maybe it would be better to move away, start fresh somewhere Meredith's influence couldn't reach. Then my phone rang with an unknown number. Samantha, a male voice said, when I answered. It's Daniel Stevens, Ryan's friend from high school. We met a few times at his graduation and birthdays. I vaguely remembered a tall, serious boy who'd played baseball with Ryan. Yes, I remember. I saw what happened, Daniel said without preamble. The video that's going around. It's not right what they're doing to you. For a moment, I couldn't speak, overcome by the simple validation after so much gaslighting. Ryan and I lost touch after college, Daniel continued, but we reconnected at the wedding. Something seemed off about him, about this whole relationship. And now seeing how they're treating you, it's not the Ryan I knew. No, I agreed softly. It's not. Don't give up on him, Daniel said firmly. Whatever's happening, the real Ryan is still in there somewhere. And he needs people who actually care about him, not just what they can get from him. That conversation was the lifeline I needed. Daniel became another ally in our growing circle of people concerned about Ryan. His perspective as someone who'd known Ryan since childhood but had no connection to me gave credibility to our concerns. The cafe confrontation had been a devastating failure, but it had also shown me exactly what we were up against. Meredith was calculated, manipulative, and willing to go to extraordinary lengths to maintain her control over Ryan. I would need to be smarter, more strategic. This wasn't a battle of emotions anymore, it was chess. And Meredith had proven herself a formidable opponent. But I had something she didn't: genuine love for Ryan, and a lifetime of shared history that couldn't be erased, no matter how hard she tried to rewrite it. The game wasn't over yet. After the cafe disaster, I knew I needed a more methodical approach. Direct confrontation clearly wouldn't work. It would only play into Meredith's hands. Instead, I needed irrefutable evidence of what was really happening. James, who had connections throughout Boston's financial industry, began discreetly asking questions about Ryan's professional activities. Daniel used his old friendship with Ryan to reconnect carefully, observing changes in his behavior and gathering information. I focused on researching Meredith's background more thoroughly than my initial searches. We met weekly at my apartment, comparing notes and building a comprehensive picture of the situation. 3 weeks into our investigation, James brought disturbing news. Ryan's firm is quietly conducting an internal audit of his accounts, he told us. His expression, grave. That doesn't happen without cause. Could someone have reported him? Daniel asked. James shook his head. More likely they've noticed discrepancies in the accounts he manages. The kind of things that raise red flags. What kind of discrepancies? I asked, my stomach knotting with anxiety. Unauthorized transactions, unusual patterns of withdrawals followed by deposits. James hesitated. The kind of activity that suggests someone might be temporarily using client funds for personal purposes before replacing them. The implications were horrifying. If Ryan was mishandling client money even temporarily, he could lose his license, face hefty fines, or even criminal charges. That's not Ryan, I insisted. He would never risk his career that way. The Ryan we knew wouldn't, Daniel agreed. But the Ryan who's under Meredith's influence, I'm not so sure anymore. My research into Meredith was yielding equally troubling results. Through persistent digging and some social engineering, I'd managed to discover she'd legally changed her name 6 years ago from Meredith Davies to Meredith Taylor. Further investigation revealed why Meredith Davies had been accused of financial impropriety at her first job out of college, working at an art gallery where significant sums had gone missing. The gallery owner, who happened to be dating Meredith at the time, had declined to press charges, but she'd been quietly let go. Shortly afterward, Meredith Davies ceased to exist, and Meredith Taylor emerged with a fabricated background and the financial backing of her wealthy parents, who seemed willing to do anything to maintain their family's social standing. Most disturbing was what I found when I managed to track down Jeremy Collins, the gallery owner and Meredith's ex-boyfriend, now living in Chicago. After several hesitant phone conversations, Jeremy finally opened up about his experience. She was like this perfect dream at first, he told me, his voice still carrying traces of pain years later. Charming, brilliant, seemed to worship the ground I walked on. Then gradually, she started isolating me from everyone else in my life. The pattern was eerily familiar. She convinced me my sister was trying to sabotage our relationship, that my business partner was embezzling from me. I nearly destroyed every important relationship in my life because of her manipulations. What happened with the missing money? I asked carefully. Jeremy sighed. I caught her transferring gallery funds to her personal account. When I confronted her, she broke down crying, claiming she was going to surprise me with a trip to Italy to meet important collectors. Said she was just borrowing the money temporarily and planned to replace it from her trust fund. Did you believe her? What happened with the missing money? I asked carefully. When Jeremy had tried to end the relationship, Meredith had threatened to accuse him of the theft himself, claiming she had evidence he'd been the one misappropriating funds. His wealthy parents had ultimately paid Meredith a settlement to leave quietly and not damage their son's reputation. I should have pressed charges, Jeremy said regretfully, but I was young and embarrassed about being so thoroughly manipulated. Now I wonder how many others she's done this to. Armed with this information, I began to see the probable pattern with Ryan. Meredith had identified him as a target with access to significant financial resources through his client accounts. She'd systematically isolated him from anyone who might notice changes in his behavior or question her influence. Now she was likely pushing him to finance her lifestyle by misusing client funds, perhaps convincing him it was just temporary or even necessary for their future. Meanwhile, Daniel had managed to reconnect enough with Ryan to be invited to their home for dinner. His observations were equally concerning. The dynamic between them is bizarre, he reported back. Ryan seems to constantly look to her for approval before speaking. He recites these weird talking points about his family, about you especially, that don't sound anything like him. It's like he's been programmed. Did he seem happy? At least I asked, trying to find some silver lining. Daniel hesitated. He seemed anxious, checking his phone, constantly jumpy when it rang. When Meredith left the room at one point, he started to say something to me about being worried about work but shut down completely when she returned. Most shocking was what Daniel discovered about Meredith's surveillance of Ryan. She's monitoring everything he told us, grimly. His phone is loaded with tracking apps. His email is set to forward copies to her account. She even has cameras inside their condo that she can access remotely. How do you know that? James asked. Because she bragged about it, Daniel said. Framed it as keeping him safe and making sure he's not working too hard. But it's complete control. We were building a disturbing picture, but we still needed concrete evidence if we had any hope of helping Ryan see the truth. Speculation and second-hand accounts wouldn't be enough to break through the reality Meredith had constructed around him. The breakthrough came unexpectedly through Madison Taylor, Meredith's former college roommate, who contacted me after seeing a discreet inquiry I'd posted in an alumni forum. I saw your post asking about Meredith, she said, when we met at a quiet bar outside the city. I've been waiting for years for someone to finally see through her. Madison described a pattern of behavior that perfectly matched what we'd uncovered. Meredith's talent for finding vulnerable targets, her methods of isolation and control, her lavish spending habits funded by others. She did the same thing to her previous boyfriend before Ryan, Madison confirmed. Greg was a trust fund kid who actually ran out of money trying to keep up with her spending. When his funds dried up, she dumped him and moved on to your brother. But Madison had something even more valuable than confirmation. She had documentation. During their senior year, she'd become concerned enough about Meredith's behavior that she'd kept records, copied emails, text, screenshots, financial receipts, showing Meredith's manipulation of Greg's accounts. I tried to warn him, Madison said, sliding a USB drive across the table. But she'd already convinced him I was just jealous of their relationship. Sound familiar? I nodded numbly, taking the drive. After they broke up, Greg finally saw the truth, but by then, the damage was done. He was too embarrassed to do anything about it. Madison's eyes were serious as she looked at me. Your brother is in danger, Samantha. Not just financially, but psychologically. Meredith destroys people, and she enjoys it. The evidence on Madison's drive was damning. Combined with what we'd learned from Jeremy and my own research into Meredith's name change, we now had a documented pattern of predatory behavior spanning years. We also discovered through James's financial industry contacts that Ryan's recent career success was largely illusory. While he was bringing in wealthy clients, many through Meredith's connections, the investments he was steering them toward were generating massive commissions for him, while underperforming for the clients. It's borderline unethical, if not outright fraud, James explained. He's pushing these people into investment vehicles that primarily benefit him, not them. That's not the Ryan I knew. He was always client-focused to a fault. The most disturbing discovery came when we found evidence that Meredith had been funneling Ryan's commission income into accounts only she controlled. Ryan's name was on the paperwork, but the access credentials were hers alone. She's setting him up, I realized with horror. If these financial improprieties come to light, Ryan will take the fall while she walks away with the money. We had assembled a comprehensive file of evidence: Meredith's history of financial manipulation with previous partners, documentation of her surveillance and control of Ryan, evidence of the questionable financial activities happening with his clients, and proof that she was systematically diverting his income to accounts under her control. It was time to approach Ryan again, but this time we would be prepared. I carefully compiled everything into a clear, factual presentation, removing emotional language and focusing solely on documented evidence. James helped me organize the financial information in a way that would be immediately clear to someone with Ryan's background. Rather than confront him directly, I wrote a letter explaining my concerns, attaching the most crucial evidence, and expressing my unconditional love for him, regardless of what had happened between us. I emphasized that I wanted nothing from him, not money, not even a relationship if that wasn't what he wanted, but only for him to be safe and aware of the dangerous situation he was in. I mailed the package to his office, using a tracking service to confirm delivery. Then I waited, hoping against hope that this time the evidence would be too compelling to ignore. 3 days later, the package was returned unopened. Scrawled across it in what was clearly Meredith's handwriting: "Stop harassing us or face legal consequences." My heart sank. Meredith was intercepting his mail now, too. That evening, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, no one was there. Just a note taped to my door: "Back off or you'll regret it. This is your final warning." The threat was clear, and it confirmed my worst fears. Meredith felt threatened by our investigation and was becoming more aggressive in her attempts to shut it down. What I didn't know then was just how far she would go to protect her scheme. That evening, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, no one was there. Just a note taped to my door: "Back off or you'll regret it. This is your final warning." When I arrived at work the following Monday, my boss called me into her office immediately. "We've received a concerning email," she said, her expression a mixture of confusion and discomfort. "From Meredith Reynolds. She claims you've been harassing her and Ryan, and that you're using company resources to do so." My stomach dropped. That's absolutely false. She's provided screenshots of emails allegedly sent from your work account containing threatening language. My boss slid a printed page across her desk. "Did you send this?" I stared at the email in horror. It appeared to be from my work address to Meredith, filled with vicious threats and unstable language. "No, this is fabricated. I never wrote this." "IT is investigating my boss," said her tone, making it clear she wasn't convinced of my innocence. "In the meantime, we think it's best if you take some personal time." It was a suspension in everything but name. I left the office in a daze, aware of colleagues' curious stares. By that evening, rumors of my termination for harassment were already spreading through professional networks, despite no such action having been taken. I called our IT department immediately, explaining the situation and begging them to verify the email was fake. They promised to investigate, but these things take time. Meanwhile, Meredith escalated her campaign. 3 days after the work incident, I returned to my apartment to find the door ajar. Inside, nothing appeared stolen, but my laptop was open on the coffee table, exactly where I'd been keeping our research on Meredith. All the files were gone. The USB drive Madison had given me was missing. Even my cloud backups had been accessed and wiped clean. Years of photos, documents, and personal files had vanished, along with all our evidence against Meredith. I called the police immediately, but their response was tepid at best. They took a report for the break-in, but seemed skeptical when I explained about the missing files. So nothing of value was taken, the officer clarified, looking around at my intact electronics and jewelry. The files were valuable, I insisted. They contained evidence of financial fraud and manipulation. Uh-huh, the officer said, clearly unconvinced. And this would be evidence against your brother's wife, the one who reported your harassment last week. My blood ran cold. She reported me to the police. The officer looked uncomfortable. There's a record of a complaint filed by Meredith Reynolds stating her sister-in-law, that would be you, has been exhibiting stalking behavior and making threats. That's completely false. Maybe so, the officer said, closing his notebook. But given the existing complaint and the lack of forced entry or stolen property, there's not much we can do here. As he left, he added almost sympathetically, family issues are better handled privately than through the legal system, ma'am. I stood in my violated apartment, feeling utterly helpless. Meredith had methodically destroyed my credibility with the police, my employer, and our social circle. Now she'd physically stolen our evidence, leaving me with nothing but my word against her carefully constructed narrative. The next blow came the following day, when my boss called to inform me that the IT investigation had been inconclusive. They couldn't definitively prove I hadn't sent the threatening emails. While they weren't firing me outright, they were placing me on indefinite administrative leave pending further investigation. In practical terms, I was unemployed. That same afternoon, Ryan and Meredith filed for a temporary restraining order against me, citing escalating harassment and threatening behavior. The application included the fabricated emails, statements from witnesses to my outburst at the cafe, and even manipulated text messages purporting to show my obsessive behavior. The temporary order was granted immediately, requiring me to stay at least 500 feet from both of them, their home and Ryan's workplace. When I called James and Daniel to discuss our next steps, the news got even worse. They're moving, James said grimly. Ryan gave notice at the firm yesterday. They're relocating to Chicago within the month. Chicago, I repeated, stunned. Ryan had always loved Boston. His entire professional network was here. That makes no sense. It does if Meredith wants to get him further away from anyone who might question her influence, Daniel pointed out. Chicago is where her parents have connections. She'll have even more control there. And James added reluctantly, there are whispers. The move isn't entirely voluntary. The compliance issues I mentioned, they've escalated. Ryan might be leaving before he's forced out. The walls were closing in. With our evidence gone and my credibility systematically destroyed, I had no way to help my brother. Worse, if he was indeed involved in financial improprieties, he might soon be facing legal consequences while Meredith walked away with the money. The final straw came when my mother called, her voice strained and confused. Samantha, what's happening? Ryan just called. He said you've been harassing them, that you need professional help. The betrayal cut deeper than anything before. Mom, none of that is true. Meredith is manipulating him, isolating him from everyone. He said you'd say that, Mom interrupted her, voice breaking. That you'd blame her for everything. Honey, I'm worried about you. Maybe you should talk to someone. This obsession with your brother's marriage isn't healthy. Even my mother, who knew me better than anyone except Ryan, had been turned against me. Meredith's poisonous narrative had infected every aspect of my life. That night, I sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by packed boxes. My landlord had coincidentally decided not to renew my lease. With no job and a tarnished reputation, finding a new apartment in Boston would be nearly impossible. Maybe it was time to leave, to start over somewhere Meredith's influence couldn't reach. I'd already reached out to a cousin in Seattle about staying with her while I looked for work. I'd booked a one-way flight for the following week. The defeat felt absolute crushing in its totality. He said you'd say that, Mom interrupted her, voice breaking. That you'd blame her for everything. Honey, I'm worried about you. Maybe you should talk to someone. This obsession with your brother's marriage isn't healthy. Hello! Is this Samantha Reynolds? A female voice asked cautiously. Yes. Who's this? My name is Sophie Chen. I was Ryan's assistant at the firm. She paused. We need to talk. In person. I have information about your brother and Meredith that you need to see. A tiny spark of hope flared in my chest. Why would you help me? Everyone else believes I'm unstable and obsessed. Because I've been watching what's happening to Ryan for months, Sophie replied. And what they're doing to you now is exactly what they did to the last person who tried to warn him. Who? His former mentor, William Harris. The one who supposedly retired to Florida last year. He didn't retire. He was forced out after he questioned some of Ryan's transactions. Meredith destroyed his reputation just like she's doing to yours. The spark grew stronger. Where can we meet? Not anywhere public, Sophie said quickly. Meredith has friends everywhere. Do you know the boathouse at Jamaica Pond? Tomorrow, 6 a.m. It'll be deserted that early. As I hung up, I looked at the packed boxes surrounding me. My flight to Seattle wasn't for 5 days. Perhaps surrender had been premature. One last chance. One final ally I never expected. If Sophie really had evidence, maybe there was still hope for Ryan after all. I slept fitfully that night, alternating between renewed determination and fear that the meeting might be another trap. But at 5:30 the next morning, I was on my way to Jamaica Pond, ready to take whatever chance remained to save my brother. The pre-dawn air was crisp as I approached Jamaica Pond, my footsteps crunching on the gravel path. The boathouse loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the gradually lightening sky. I scanned the area nervously, half expecting to see Meredith or the police waiting to catch me violating the restraining order. Instead, a petite woman in a gray hoodie stepped out from behind a tree. Samantha. I nodded cautiously. Sophie. She approached, glancing over her shoulder. I've been watching to make sure no one followed either of us. We should be safe here. Sophie led me to a bench, partially hidden by bushes, then pulled a tablet from her backpack. I've been Ryan's assistant for almost 2 years. I was there when he met Meredith, and I've watched everything change since then. Why are you helping me? I asked. You're risking your job. Because I actually like Ryan, she said simply. The real Ryan, not whoever he's becoming. And because what happened to William Harris was wrong. He tried to warn Ryan about some irregular transactions and questioned Meredith's constant presence in the office. Within weeks, he was facing sexual harassment allegations and his reputation was destroyed. That sounds familiar, I said grimly. I started documenting everything after that, Sophie continued. Every unusual request, every questionable transaction, every time Meredith accessed Ryan's computer or emails when he wasn't around. My eyes widened. She does that, constantly. She has all his passwords, monitors all his communications. Nothing happens without her knowing. Sophie unlocked her tablet and pulled up an encrypted folder. I've backed this up in multiple secure locations. It's what you need to help Ryan. For the next hour, Sophie showed me meticulously organized evidence, screenshots of Meredith accessing Ryan's emails and deleting messages from family and friends, documentation of altered financial records, recordings of Meredith instructing Ryan on what to say to clients, colleagues, and even to me. Most damning were the financial records showing how client funds were being temporarily diverted to accounts controlled by Meredith, then replaced just before monthly audits. Classic check kiting that could land Ryan in prison. Ryan genuinely doesn't understand what's happening, Sophie explained. Meredith frames everything as managing their future or strategic investments. When he questions anything, she gaslights him until he doubts his own understanding. This is incredible, I said, overwhelmed by both the thoroughness of Sophie's documentation and the extent of Meredith's manipulation. But how do we get Ryan to see it? She's intercepting all his communications and I can't go near him because of the restraining order. That's why I reached out to you, Sophie said. I can't approach Ryan directly either. Meredith has made it clear my job depends on my discretion. We need a strategic approach, something Meredith won't see coming. I called James and Daniel immediately, and we arranged to meet at James's apartment that afternoon, along with Sophie. This unexpected ally had not only provided the concrete evidence we'd lost, but offered a unique perspective from inside Ryan's professional world. The four of us spent hours developing a plan. Direct confrontation had failed spectacularly. Any attempt to present evidence to Ryan would be intercepted and twisted by Meredith. We needed to create a situation where Ryan would discover the truth himself in a way Meredith couldn't control or manipulate. The key is to use Meredith's patterns against her, Sophie suggested. She's so confident in her control that she's become predictable. How so? I asked. The four of us spent hours developing a plan. Direct confrontation had failed spectacularly. Any attempt to present evidence to Ryan would be intercepted and twisted by Meredith. We needed to create a situation where Ryan would discover the truth himself in a way Meredith couldn't control or manipulate. So, we need to create a situation where Ryan sees the manipulation happening in real time, James said slowly. Something she can't spin or explain away. And we need to do it before they leave for Chicago, Daniel added. Once they're gone, we may never get another chance. Sophie's inside position provided the perfect opportunity. As Ryan's assistant, she had legitimate reasons to contact him directly about work matters, communications, even Meredith would expect. Our plan took shape. Sophie would alert Ryan to a discrepancy in one of his client accounts, a real issue, but one carefully chosen to lead him toward discovering the larger pattern of financial manipulation. The discrepancy would be significant enough that he would need to investigate personally, rather than delegating to Sophie or discussing it with Meredith first. The Donovan account is perfect, Sophie suggested. It's one of his oldest clients, someone he has a personal relationship with. And Meredith has been using it as a pass-through for some of her larger transfers. Will Ryan be able to trace it back to her? I asked anxiously. If he looks carefully, yes. The money trail is clear once you know what to look for. And Ryan is actually brilliant with financial forensics when he's thinking clearly. James would position himself at the firm as a visiting consultant, giving Ryan an immediate, trustworthy resource if he had questions about what he found. Daniel would create a seemingly coincidental meeting with Ryan that day, providing emotional support once the financial issues became clear. My role would be the most difficult and the most crucial. I needed to remain completely invisible while still being available if Ryan reached out. The restraining order meant I couldn't be anywhere near him, but I could prepare responses to any potential contact, ready with the full evidence Sophie had compiled. The timing has to be perfect, Sophie emphasized. If Meredith suspects anything, she'll shut it down immediately. We chose the following Tuesday for our plan. Meredith had a standing lunch with her mother that day, giving us a window when she wouldn't be monitoring Ryan quite as closely. The days leading up to Tuesday were agonizing. I'd canceled my flight to Seattle but continued packing my apartment. Partly as cover in case Meredith was having me watched, and partly because I might still need to leave, depending on how things unfolded. Sophie kept us updated on the atmosphere at the office. Ryan was increasingly tense, working late hours while Meredith hovered nearby. The firm's internal audit was progressing, with investigators asking more pointed questions about specific accounts, including Donovan's. It's only a matter of time before they find what I found, Sophie warned during our final planning session. If that happens before Ryan understands what's been happening, he'll take the fall for everything. Tuesday morning arrived with a thunderstorm that matched the tension I felt. I stationed myself at a coffee shop near my apartment, far from Ryan's office, but with my phone charged and ready. James texted that he was in position at the firm, while Daniel confirmed he was coincidentally having lunch at Ryan's favorite sandwich place. At precisely 1130, Sophie sent the triggering email to Ryan, flagging a concerning discrepancy in the Donovan account that required his immediate attention. Now, all we could do was wait. The minutes crawled by with excruciating slowness. At 1215, James texted, "He's reviewing the account. Looks concerned." At 1240, another update. "He's digging deeper. Found the first transfer." At 1:05, Meredith called. He told her he's busy with an audit issue. She's cutting lunch short, heading back. My heart raced. Would Ryan discover enough before Meredith returned to control the narrative? At 128, my phone rang with a blocked number. I answered with shaking hands. Sam Ryan's voice was barely a whisper. "I need to talk to you. Not now. I can't. Something's wrong. I'll call again." The line went dead before I could respond. It was the first time I'd heard my brother's voice without the cold hostility Meredith had cultivated. He sounded confused, frightened, but most importantly, he sounded like Ryan again, not the programmed version Meredith had created. James texted minutes later. Meredith arrived, made a scene about an emergency at home, trying to get Ryan to leave. Then from Daniel, Ryan said he needs to finish something important. Meredith, not happy, waiting in lobby. The next hour was silent. No updates, no calls. Finally, at 3:15, Sophie texted, "Ryan asked me to pull all of Donovan's records for the past year." Meredith tried to interrupt, but he actually raised his voice to her. He never does that. Hope surged through me. Ryan was fighting back, even if in this small way. At 5:30, another blocked call. Sam Ryan again, his voice stronger but still tense. "Can you meet me tomorrow, early? There's a diner in Cambridge, the Blue Plate, 6 a.m. "Yes," I said quickly, Ryan. "Don't say anything else," he interrupted. "I don't know what's real anymore. Just be there." That evening was the longest of my life. I prepared meticulously, organizing Sophie's evidence along with our original research that she had fortunately backed up. I rehearsed what I would say, focusing on facts rather than emotions, determined not to give Meredith any ammunition if this conversation was being recorded or monitored. I arrived at the diner at 5:30 a.m., chose a corner booth with a clear view of the door, and ordered coffee I couldn't drink. At exactly 6 a.m., the bell above the door jingled and my brother walked in. Ryan looked terrible, pale with dark circles under his eyes and his normally immaculate appearance disheveled. He scanned the diner, spotted me, and walked over with the caution of someone approaching a wild animal. "The restraining order," he said as he slid into the booth. "If anyone sees us." "I'm willing to take that risk," I said quietly. "Are you?" He nodded, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "I found something yesterday. Something that doesn't make sense. About the Donovan account." I remained silent, letting him continue at his own pace. "There are transfers, large ones, that I didn't authorize, but they're authorized under my credentials." He looked up, confusion and fear evident in his eyes. "Sam, I think someone's been moving client money around using my access." "What does Meredith say?" I asked carefully. A flash of something, suspicion, realization pain, crossed his face. I haven't told her exactly what I found. When I mentioned discrepancies, she said it was probably an accounting error and that I shouldn't waste time on it right before our move. "But you kept looking anyway." "I had to. It's my client, my responsibility." Ryan's voice strengthened with these words, a glimpse of his true self breaking through. "The more I looked, the more I found. And then I started wondering what else I've missed." Slowly, gently, I slid a folder across the table. "There's a lot you've missed, Ryan. But it's not your fault." He stared at the folder for a long moment before opening it. Inside was Sophie's evidence, meticulously organized, and annotated financial records showing the pattern of diverted funds, screenshots of altered emails, documentation of Meredith's systematic isolation tactics. Ryan's face crumpled as he turned page after page. "This can't be real," he whispered, but his expression said he already knew it was. "There's more," I said, softly passing him a second folder containing the research on Meredith's past, her name change, her history with previous boyfriends, the pattern of financial manipulation that had followed her from relationship to relationship. We sat in silence as he absorbed it all, his hands trembling slightly as he turned the pages. "The gambling problems," he finally said, looking up at me. "The threats against Meredith. None of that was real." "None of it," I confirmed. "Meredith fabricated all of it, to isolate you from me, from everyone who cares about you." But I saw the texts, the emails, altered or completely fabricated. "She has access to all your accounts, Ryan. She sees everything you see, but you don't see everything she does." He closed the folders, his expression unreadable. "I need time to process this, to verify it independently." I nodded, understanding his caution. "That's fair. You shouldn't just take my word for it, but please be careful. If Meredith suspects you're questioning her." "She already does," Ryan said grimly. "She barely slept last night watching me, checking my phone when she thought I was asleep." I reached across the table, not touching him but offering my hand. After a moment's hesitation, he took it. "I'm sorry, Sam," he said, his voice breaking. "If even half of this is true, what I've put you through." "She already does," Ryan said grimly. "She barely slept last night watching me, checking my phone when she thought I was asleep." I reached across the table, not touching him but offering my hand. After a moment's hesitation, he took it. The battle wasn't over. Meredith would fight viciously when cornered. But for the first time since discovering the wedding photos, I believed my brother might find his way back to himself and to me. The weeks following our diner meeting were both tense and transformative. Ryan didn't contact me immediately, which was agonizing but understandable. He needed time to process everything, to verify the evidence independently without raising Meredith's suspicions. Sophie kept me updated on the subtle changes at the office. Ryan had quietly requested access to additional account records, focusing first on confirming the pattern of financial manipulation we'd documented. He'd also begun changing his passwords and checking his computer for monitoring software. "We'll deal with that later," I promised. "Right now, we need to focus on getting you out safely, personally, and professionally." "He's being careful," Sophie reported, not confronting Meredith directly, but creating space to think clearly for the first time in years. My boss, presented with proof that the threatening emails had indeed been fabricated, offered to reinstate me immediately. I negotiated instead for a generous severance package, realizing I needed a fresh start. The bank had been my safety net for too long, a reminder of dreams deferred for Ryan's sake. It was time to prioritize my own future for once. 3 weeks after our meeting, I received a text from an unknown number, "Park bench. Our spot. 4 p.m. Ryan and I had frequented a particular bench overlooking the Charles River during his college years. It was where we'd sit while he vented about difficult classes or relationship problems, where I'd helped him make major life decisions. If he was suggesting we meet there, it was significant. When I arrived, Ryan was already seated, staring out at the water. He looked different. Thinner, more tired, but somehow more present than he'd been in years. The artificial polish Meredith had cultivated had been replaced by something authentic if wounded. "You were right," he said without preamble as I sat beside him. "About everything." I remained silent, giving him space to continue. "I've spent weeks verifying every document, every claim. It's all true." His voice cracked slightly. "She's been systematically controlling every aspect of my life, isolating me, using me to access client funds." "I'm so sorry, Ryan." He shook his head. "Don't apologize. I'm the one who abandoned you, who chose to believe lies about the person who's always been there for me. You were manipulated by someone extremely skilled at manipulation," I reminded him gently. "This isn't just about you and me. Meredith has done this before. It's a pattern." Ryan nodded, his eyes still on the river. "The firm's internal investigation has expanded. They've found most of what we documented, plus more. They're building a case." He turned to me, finally, his expression pained. "I've been cooperating fully, providing everything I've learned. It's the only way to salvage anything of my career." "What about Meredith?" A complex emotion crossed his face. Grief, anger, resolve. "I confronted her 4 days ago after I'd secured copies of all the evidence. She didn't react well." "Are you safe?" I asked urgently. "Yes." She tried the usual tactics, crying, claiming it was all for us, then accusing me of paranoia when that didn't work. When I showed her the evidence, she switched to threats. His mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "Turns out I've been recording our conversations for the past 2 weeks on the advice of the firm's legal team. Her threats are now part of the case file." Relief flooded through me. "So it's over." "Almost. I've moved out, filed for divorce. The firm has placed me on administrative leave while the investigation concludes, but they've indicated I won't be facing charges since I've been cooperating." He sighed heavily. "My career there is over, of course. No one trusts a financial advisor who couldn't spot fraud happening under his own name, even if he was a victim. What will you do?" "Start over," he said simply. "Somewhere new, but not Chicago. Meredith's parents have apparently disowned her now that her schemes have been exposed. They're more concerned with their social standing than supporting her. We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching boats glide past on the river. I don't know how to make this right, Sam, Ryan finally said. What I did to you. Excluding you from the wedding, believing those horrible lies, allowing her to destroy your reputation. You don't need to make it right today, I told him. This isn't something that gets fixed in one conversation. We've both been through trauma, Ryan. Healing takes time. Are you willing to try, he asked, vulnerability clear in his voice. To rebuild? I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to walk away after everything I put you through. I thought about it seriously, respecting his question enough not to give a reflexive answer. The pain of his betrayal had been profound. The damage to my life had been real. Trust once broken so completely wouldn't be easily restored. But looking at my brother, really seeing him again after years of watching him disappear into Meredith's creation, I knew my answer. Start over, he said simply. Somewhere new but not Chicago. Meredith's parents have apparently disowned her now that her schemes have been exposed. They're more concerned with their social standing than supporting her. The relief on his face was palpable. He didn't move to hug me, understanding that physical boundaries were part of the trust we needed to rebuild. Instead, he simply nodded, respect and gratitude in his eyes. Are you willing to try, he asked, vulnerability clear in his voice. To rebuild? I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to walk away after everything I put you through. The relief on his face was palpable. He didn't move to hug me, understanding that physical boundaries were part of the trust we needed to rebuild. Instead, he simply nodded, respect and gratitude in his eyes. I used my severance package to finally pursue the dream I'd deferred for so long, enrolling in a graduate program in educational psychology. The girl who had sacrificed college to care for her brother and mother was finally investing in her own future. We maintained contact through regular phone calls and occasional visits, carefully rebuilding our bond with honesty and clear boundaries. Each conversation felt more natural than the last, as the shadow of Meredith's influence gradually faded. 6 months after our meeting by the river, Ryan invited me to a small gathering at his new apartment in Portland, a housewarming with just a few friends, including James and Daniel, who had remained steadfast allies through everything. As we sat around his living room sharing takeout and easy conversation, I observed the changes in my brother. The artificial polish was gone, replaced by authentic confidence. He laughed more easily, spoke more freely, disagreed openly when he had a different opinion rather than looking for external validation. Yes, I said finally. I'm willing to try. One step at a time. Later that evening, as others chatted in the living room, Ryan drew me aside to his small balcony overlooking the city lights. I have something for you, he said, handing me a small wrapped package. Inside was a framed photo I'd never seen before. Ryan and me as children building our treehouse covered in dirt and beaming with pride. Mom found it while cleaning out the attic, he explained. It reminded me of who we are underneath everything that's happened. I traced the image of our younger selves, throat tight with emotion. I've been thinking a lot about that time, Ryan continued. About how you put your life on hold to take care of me after Dad left, after Mom got sick. How I took that sacrifice for granted. It wasn't a sacrifice, I corrected gently. It was a choice. You were worth it, Ryan. You still are. I want you to know I'm seeing things clearly now, he said. Not just about Meredith, but about our whole history. About how much I owe you. You don't owe me anything, I insisted. That's not how family works, at least not how it should work. Not debt, he clarified. Gratitude. Recognition. I lost sight of that for a while. A lot more than a while, I teased, finding we could now joke about it slightly. He smiled, acknowledging the gentle ribbing. The point is, I see it now, and I promise I won't forget again. We rejoined the gathering, the framed photo taking pride of place on Ryan's mantle. As I looked around at this small circle, my brother, our allies who had become friends, the new connections Ryan was building in his fresh start, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. The wedding I hadn't been invited to had nearly destroyed us both. Meredith had exploited Ryan's vulnerabilities and targeted our bond because she recognized its strength. She had nearly succeeded in her campaign to isolate and control him, to erase me from his life. He was Ryan again. My brother, not Meredith's creation. Family isn't always about blood, and it isn't always perfect. Sometimes it breaks, sometimes it bends. But when it's built on genuine love and respect, it can survive even the most deliberate attempts to destroy it. Ryan and I had emerged from this ordeal changed but intact, our relationship transformed but ultimately strengthened by the very forces that had tried to tear it apart. That, I realized, was the truest wedding gift I could have received: the return of my brother to himself and to me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever experienced a family member being manipulated or isolated by a controlling partner? How did you handle it? Drop your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. Remember, sometimes fighting for family means knowing when to step back and when to stand firm. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength and wisdom in navigating your own family relationships.